There is a moment, right before a man becomes truly powerful, when he has to choose between being seen and being free. Most people never notice this moment. They walk right past it because everything in this world is built to convince you that visibility is the same thing as value. That if you are not watched, you do not matter. That if your name is not known, your life was wasted. So we perform, we build, we chase the promotion, the platform, the applause, the version of ourselves that other people can finally approve of. And somewhere in that chase, we lose the one thing that was never supposed to be for sale. Our attention, our peace, our self. Here is the harsh truth the ancient Stoics understood, and modern life is almost erased. The higher you climb in visibility, the more of yourself you must surrender to maintain it. And the wisest men in history, the ones who actually held power, knew a secret that almost no one chasing success today is willing to accept. Sometimes the most powerful move available to you is to disappear. Not to quit, not to give up, to withdraw. Deliberately, strategically, like a blade going back into its sheath, not because it is weak, but because it is not yet needed. This is the story of a man who reached the very top of the Roman Empire, closer to ultimate power than almost anyone in his generation, and then spent his final years trying desperately to vanish. He had the villas, the wealth, the ear of the most powerful man alive, and it still was not enough to protect him. In fact, it was the very thing that made him a target. Sit with that for a second, because if visibility could not save a man that close to the throne of Rome, what makes you think it will save you? What makes you think one more follower, one more title, one more room full of people who know your name is going to be the thing that finally makes you feel safe? It won't. It never does. And the sooner you understand why, the sooner you can start building something that actually lasts. And what happened to him, and more importantly, what he wrote in the years before it, is going to change how you think about your own hunger to be seen. Rome, 62 AD. The man standing in that antechamber is Lucius Annaeus Seneca, playwright, philosopher, author of letters that would outlive the empire itself, and for nearly a decade, the most powerful advisor in Rome. Seneca had done what almost nobody in history manages to do. He had taken a teenage boy named Nero, unstable, vain, dangerously impressionable, and helped guide the machinery of the entire Roman state through him. Seneca wrote the young emperor's speeches, shaped his early policies, sat, in effect, near the throne without ever needing to sit on it. And it made him staggeringly wealthy. The historian Tacitus records that Seneca's personal fortune by this point had grown immense. Villas, gardens, loaned capital scattered across the provinces. Some ancient sources even suggest his wealth stirred resentment among the Roman elite, who whispered that a philosopher preaching indifference to riches had somehow accumulated more of them than almost anyone in Rome. Think about the position this put him in. Every letter he wrote about simplicity, about the emptiness of luxury, about a wise man's indifference to fortune, was now being read against the backdrop of his own gardens, his own loaned-out capital stretching across provinces he would never visit. The gap between the philosophy and the life had become impossible for his critics to ignore. This was not hypocrisy in any simple sense. Seneca wrote in his own surviving letters about grappling honestly with this exact tension, the difficulty of possessing wealth without being possessed by it. But grappling with attention in private writing is one thing. Being seen publicly at the center of imperial luxury while claiming allegiance to a philosophy of restraint is another. And in Rome, being seen was the whole problem. But by 62 AD, something had shifted. Nero was no longer the moldable boy Seneca once tutored. He had begun surrounding himself with other men, flatterers, more dangerous advisors, men with sharper appetites and fewer scruples about how they used their access to the emperor. The political ground beneath Seneca's feet was no longer solid. He could feel it. There is a particular kind of dread that comes from watching your position erode not through anything you did wrong, but simply because you are no longer useful in the way you once were. The court that once needed Seneca's steady hand now had other hands to rely on. And a man who has spent a decade near the center of power learns to read the smallest shifts in temperature, a delayed invitation, a conversation that stops when he enters the room, a favor granted to someone else that used to be his alone to grant. And so, according to Tacitus's account in the Annals, Seneca did something almost unheard of for a man of his position. He asked to give it all back. In the scene Tacitus describes, Seneca approaches Nero directly. He does not ask for more power, more land, more favor. He asks permission to retire, to hand back the wealth, the properties, the gardens Nero had granted him over the years, because in Tacitus's rendering of his words, Seneca argues that a man who has already been given more than he could ever need should now be allowed to withdraw and devote what remains of his life to something other than public affairs. It is important to be honest here. We do not have Seneca's exact words verbatim. What survives is Tacitus's literary reconstruction of the speech, written decades later, a common practice among Roman historians. But the substance of the moment is well documented. It captures something remarkable regardless of the precise phrasing. A man at the absolute peak of visible success tried to walk away from it. Nero, of course, refused to let him fully retire, at least outwardly. He responded, according to Tacitus, with warm reassurances, insisting Seneca's fears were unfounded and that their bond remained strong. But the warmth was hollow. Everyone in that room understood the truth beneath the pleasantries. Seneca had become too visible to simply vanish. His name, his wealth, his closeness to the throne, all of it had made him a fixture others could point to, envy, and eventually use against him. He did manage to withdraw from daily public life shortly after this exchange, retreating largely into study and writing. It's during these final years that Seneca produced his letters to Lucilius, the extended series of moral letters exploring how to live well, how to face mortality and repeatedly, how to resist the corrupting pull of crowds, spectacle, and public opinion. In one of these letters, Seneca writes about attending a public spectacle and coming away disturbed, not by the violence he witnessed, but by how quickly the crowd's energy had begun to seep into his own character. He describes withdrawing from society, even briefly, as necessary medicine against becoming like everyone shouting around you. But the retreat came too late to save him from what he had already built. In 65 AD, a conspiracy against Nero was uncovered, the Pisonian conspiracy. Seneca's connection to it remains disputed among historians. Some ancient sources suggest his ties were minimal or circumstantial. It did not matter. Nero ordered his former mentor to die by his own hand. Tacitus's account of Seneca's final hours describes a controlled, composed death, Seneca reportedly comforting those around him, dictating final thoughts, remaining, by all recorded impressions, remarkably steady until the end. The very visibility that made him powerful was the same visibility that made him impossible to ignore when the empire needed someone to blame. Here is what almost everyone misses about this story. Seneca did not fail because he sought power. He failed because he never fully understood, until it was nearly too late, that visibility and safety are not the same currency. In modern psychology, we have language for what happened to him. Constant visibility creates what researchers call social surveillance stress, chronic, low-grade tension of knowing you are always being observed, judged, measured. It is exhausting in ways that rarely announce themselves. It just quietly drains the reserve you need for clear thinking. And there is something deeper happening, too. The more attached your identity becomes to being seen, to status, applause, recognition, the more your sense of self starts to depend on things completely outside your control. Other people's opinions, political winds, the teenage emperor's shifting moods. This is precisely what the Stoics meant by the dichotomy of control. Marcus Aurelius, writing privately in what we now call Meditations, returned to this idea again and again. The constant discipline of separating what is truly yours, your judgments, your effort, your character, from what is not, your reputation, your rank, how others perceive you. Seneca knew this philosophy better than almost anyone alive in his era. He had written about it extensively. And still, he spent years entangled in a level of visibility that made him structurally vulnerable, because the wealth and the closeness to power kept accumulating faster than his willingness to let them go. This is the hidden psychological trap of modern success culture, too. We are taught that more visibility equals more security. More followers, more title, more presence. Surely that makes you safer, more untouchable. But visibility does not protect you. It exposes you. It puts a target where there used to be a private, quiet, defensible space. Real security, the kind the Stoics actually pursued, comes from an internal fortress. Marcus Aurelius called exactly that in his private writings, a retreat available to you at any moment, regardless of circumstance, simply by turning inward and examining your own judgments rather than the noise around you. Notice something important here. Marcus was, by any measure, one of the most visible men who ever lived. Emperor of Rome, commander of legions, a face on coins circulated across 3 continents. He did not have the option of literal disappearance the way Seneca briefly attempted. And yet he built the same internal withdrawal anyway, a private mental space no crowd could access, no title could inflate, no flattering courtier could corrupt. This is the real distinction worth understanding. Disappearing is not always a physical act. Sometimes it is impossible to remove yourself from the stage entirely. You have a business to run, a family depending on you, a public role you cannot simply abandon. What you can always do, regardless of circumstance, is withdraw your identity from that stage, even while your body remains on it. Learning to disappear, in this sense, is not about hiding from the world out of fear. It is about refusing to let your sense of worth be rented out to an audience that could change its mind about you at any moment. And this matters more now than it did in Seneca's Rome. Because the audience today is not a court of a few hundred people who might gossip about you at a banquet. It is potentially millions watching through a screen, capable of turning on you in the time it takes to refresh a feed. The stakes of over-identifying with visibility have only grown since antiquity, even as the tools for gaining that visibility have become dangerously easy to reach for. The goal was never invisibility for its own sake. The goal was independence from the crowd's gaze, so that when visibility does happen to you, whether by success or by circumstance, it does not own you. So, how do you actually practice this? Not as an abstract idea, but as a daily discipline. Seneca himself recommended this in his letters, the practice of intentionally stepping back from crowds and noise for defined periods, specifically to observe how much of your mood and thinking have been shaped by external influence. Practically, this means scheduling actual blocks of disconnection, not vague self-care. A specific hour or a specific day where you remove yourself from social feeds, group chats, and public performance entirely. Not to escape responsibility, to recalibrate your internal compass before it drifts any further toward what other people expect of you. Start small if you need to. One evening a week where the phone stays in another room. Notice, honestly, how much low-grade tension lifts once you're no longer available to be watched, judged, or responded to. That tension you feel lifting is the exact cost of visibility that most people never stop to measure because they are never without it long enough to notice it was there. Before you begin any meaningful project, a business, a piece of writing, a difficult conversation, write down in one sentence why you are doing it. Then check, is the reason rooted in the work itself or in how you imagine being perceived once it's finished? This is not a one-time exercise. It is a recurring check-in. Marcus Aurelius practiced a version of this constantly in his private notebook, interrogating his own motives before acting, asking whether he was pursuing something because it was right or because it would be seen and praised. When the answer leans toward the applause, don't abandon the project. Just consciously re-anchor your reason for doing it. This single habit is what allows you to keep working steadily even when recognition doesn't come, or worse, when it disappears. Set aside 10 minutes, ideally at the start or end of your day, to write privately, not for anyone else to read. Ask yourself one question: what today was actually within my control? Then list it. Separately, list what was outside your control and simply happened to you. Over weeks, this practice trains your mind to instinctively locate the boundary between your effort and the world's noise. It is the same discipline that let Marcus Aurelius govern an empire during plague and war without being psychologically flattened by either. Keep the language simple when you write. You are not composing something for an audience, not even a future version of yourself who might read it back for inspiration. The moment this exercise becomes performative, even privately, it loses its power. The whole point is that no one is watching, including, eventually, the part of your own mind that is used to performing. This one is uncomfortable, and it's meant to be. Occasionally, do good work and deliberately do not announce it. Solve a problem, help someone, finish something meaningful, and let it go unseen on purpose. Seneca and other Stoic writers frequently discussed voluntary hardship as training, depriving yourself of comfort occasionally so that comfort's absence no longer controls you. Applied here, Deliberately forgoing recognition trains the part of your mind that has come to expect applause as payment. Over time, you find your motivation becomes sturdier because it no longer depends on being witnessed. Do this consistently, and something shifts. You stop needing the crowd's gaze to know your effort was real. It will feel strange at first, almost like a small loss, a good deed with nowhere to land, a finished project with no one clapping. Sit in that discomfort rather than resolving it by mentioning the thing anyway. That discomfort is the exact muscle you are training. And over time, you'll notice you no longer need to broadcast your worth to be certain of it. Seneca spent his final years trying to hand back everything that had made him visible. And history remembers him now, 2,000 years later, not for the wealth, not for the palace access, but for the quiet letters he wrote when he finally stepped back from all of it. That should tell you something. The parts of your life that will actually last are rarely the parts anyone was watching. So build your fortress inward. Let your worth answer to you, before it ever answers to a crowd. Because the ones who learn to disappear, even for a moment, are often the only ones who come back with anything real to say. If this made you think differently, even for a second, subscribe. There's more of this waiting for you. Until then, stay quiet, stay sharp, and build something that doesn't need to be seen to be worth building.